No, so I think I agree with Randy here, right? Because OpenStack is not supposed to be something to replace an existing virtualization platform. I think that's been the biggest mistake that I've seen enterprises go to, right? They actually want to, they have a traditional virtualization platform and they were actually looking at something new. They said, let us bring OpenStack and move everything there. That's not the right way, right? OpenStack should be treated as for your greenfield apps, for your net new apps, cloud native applications, whether it is running VM that are stateful or stateless, but still running for next generation applications. Trying to bring the old one in, it's like the issue that we had with virtualization technology 10 years ago. Everything was running on bare metal, they bring it onto VMs and they wanted the same functionality. They've learned over the years that that's not the way it is. Bare metal has its own niche, VMs have their own niche, and OpenStack has its own place.
Thank you. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, the other thing about cloud-native applications is they're not like packaged apps, right? A lot of them are very custom. So you don't have, you can't call a support line for, say, Oracle or SAP and say, there's something wrong with my application. You have to call your own developer, and your developer knows basically what underlying infrastructure resources he wanted to leverage. And often if that's not clear to him, then you have suffering at the application layer.
So from the cloud native applications, we kind of hinted upon the opinionated OpenStack. Maybe the question for Avi to be is like, what do you think? What do you recommend? Prescriptive OpenStack or the OpenStack with a lot of choices? If it is prescriptive opinionated, what would you recommend to be part of that, and what would you exclude?
I recommend what the customer wants, right? So,
come on, man.
You're supposed to recommend Pure.
if the customer wants Pure, then I will recommend Pure. But at the end of the day, if it falls down and he blames Pure or any other vendor, then it's basically the vendor's problem. What problem are you trying to solve, and what are the best tools you have available? So if the market says, we want something which is prescriptive, an easy button, something with no nerd knobs, that's what you build. If they say that, no, we want choice, we want to be able to configure every damn button out there, then that's what you build.
Maybe time to look at the user survey.
Well, if you going back to the deployment tools, if you take a look at what's out there right now, you can look at the OpenStack deployers guide and start from there, and you can see every knob that you can twiddle to build up OpenStack the way that you want, and that's a way that you can go. On the other end of that, you look at a system like Cola, which takes a very opinionated way of how it's going to install OpenStack, and it works for most instances. Like for generic workloads, it gets the job done. But yes, I mean, one of the strengths and powers of OpenStack, and vendors have wanted this. This is something that vendors are asking for and users are asking for is configurability. And when you have a large distributed open source project like this, it's a benefit, but you could also call it a drawback. And I think that's just the way OpenStack is going to be.
And at the end of the day, this is sort of like the Apple iPhone versus the Android discussion, right? So there are pros and cons to each. You decide whether you want an iPhone or you want an Android. So
more specifically, do you want to have the jack or not? That's the question. So.
But if there's one more thing that I can add too, is it's also something that the community is thinking about, and we have these working groups that are talking about what does it look like to have a cloud that is dedicated towards NFV, because the requirements that you have for NFV are going to be completely different if you are running a cloud that's being used for CI, and it's going to be used completely different for a cloud that you're using to deliver media, and so we're looking at actually beginning to write down what the requirements are for these systems. And so instead of saying that you just have vanilla OpenStack and you only get OpenStack in one way, instead say OpenStack gives you the power and the flexibility to deploy systems that meet the needs that you want in this way. And really, I think in the next year we're going to see a lot of really drilling down and focusing on this is how you provide a particular installation of OpenStack to perform a particular task.
Yeah, but aren't we hindered in that? I've been pushing for this for 3 years, and aren't we hindered in that because we still have people who insist that OpenStack can't be broken down? So like if I want a flavor of OpenStack for, say, containers, I don't need VMs. So why should I have to have Nova to call it OpenStack? And to the work that you're doing, I know we've had lots of conversations about this. Like when do we start to see interoperability test suites for flavors I mean, I just don't see the appetite, particularly at the level of the TC, to have OpenStack for NFV, OpenStack for containers, OpenStack for PaaS, or whatever the variety is. Like, my concern is that you're right, that's the right way to go. Those conversations are being had, but like, are they going to run up against the shoals of, sort of a lot of the ideological positions that key developers have taken and seem highly attached to?
Let's build a startup that does this. Come on, guys.
Well, I mean, to directly answer this, there's a distinction between projects within OpenStack. So we talk about this idea of big tent, and there are dozens of projects inside of the big tent that are meant to accomplish particular goals. Versus what we're talking about when we have a trademark program, and building out a successful trademark program on interoperability, it took a lot of time, and it's taken a lot of work. And even with the introduction of the program, we had to do a lot of massaging to get it to a point where it was reasonable. And that's based on experiential knowledge. But now that we have that knowledge, and again, this is actually something that we have talked about, where my vision for the OpenStack-powered trademark program and interoperability for the future is to be able to say that I have OpenStack-powered database, and I have OpenStack-powered big data, I have OpenStack-powered bare metal, and in some ways to let the community define what that looks like. And I very strongly believe in that. So I think in some ways we're talking about the same things. It takes time to get there.
Jay, you have something to add, or?
No. So for me, it is like you probably want to be prescriptive for a general purpose OpenStack, and you want to be custom for a specific use case. Because if you actually have a specific requirement that doesn't follow the general norm, then you probably go with the general purpose custom deployment. If you have something that's general purpose OpenStack to actually have a cloud platform for your enterprise, you just probably go with prescriptive that's been well proven and tested by everyone else, right? So it depends on what the ask is and where you're going. But actually asking for something that's prescriptive, that's configurable, is not going to happen. You probably go one way or the other.
Okay, so I had actually a couple questions, but I'm going to actually ask one because I want to leave some room. You guys have questions, right? I think you do, or you will. All right, so I know, sir, you asked about containers, and so I'm not sure I'm going to ask that again. I mean, I was going to say, how is OpenStack coping with container? Because it was designed for cloud native, as you highlighted, but then cloud native is sort of shifted to the container world, and so there's an adjustment. How is it doing? So I wanted to sort of ask that, but really probably even more important is for non-cloud native, for existing apps, legacy, traditional, whatever you want to call them. What have you seen out there in terms of people bringing apps and successfully running them? I think, Comcast had, it's hard sometimes to tell. A lot of what people are doing is new versus how much of it is bringing old applications, existing pieces of code, and so on. I'm just wondering what everybody's experience is, and it doesn't matter. Anybody can start.
I'll probably start.
Right.
We actually had one of the biggest OpenStack deployments in the central region, one of the financial services agency, and they made a huge investment in moving everything off a virtualization platform to OpenStack. What they learned is it actually took them 2 years to actually move those workloads. It actually went through a lot of pain to actually figure out that OpenStack was not the right fit, but they actually had to go through pains to make it work for them, right? So it is not going to be easy to actually move your legacy workloads into OpenStack. OpenStack still needs to have a lot of it done if it actually wants to be the platform for legacy. It's not there yet. So if you're looking at moving your legacy workloads to OpenStack, my response would be don't do it. Focus on cloud native. Yes, it has its place for some workloads. You can probably do it, but that's not recommended.
Thank you.
And if you are going to take the pain of moving your legacy workloads onto OpenStack, please, please, please understand the licensing implications of running something like Oracle or SQL Server in a virtualized environment. It's not the same as physical, and you might be getting a big bill.
Anybody else wants to?
You can only ask only one question. So
I mean, look, we see this desire from customer. I mean, we're IBM, so we see this desire all the time. And at the end of the day, I think there's just limitations inside the platform that make it not a realistic choice. Particularly when you start to incorporate you start to incorporate the security teams and the networking teams and the storage teams, and they all have their requirements, and they all ask for certain IOPS, and they all ask for DMZs, and they all ask for 18 different VLANs, and it's like you can do all, you in theory can do many of those things. It's just, is the benefit of going through that exercise worth the struggle, and the struggle not just from the customer perspective, but the struggle, quite frankly, from the vendor perspective. So we made the decision within the Blue Box offering that we weren't going to support those capabilities. That's cost us deals. There's customers that say, hey, we won't buy the product without those capabilities. But at the end of the day, we went the route of, hey, we got to have a consistent prescriptive offering that does one thing really darn well, and we recognize that by doing that, we're going to alienate a certain set of workloads, and we were happy to do that, to be able to have that single option.
You know, interestingly, last week at Oracle Open World, Larry said he was going to bring, you know, the kind of virtualization, the kind of infrastructure as a service for databases to run, right? So I guess to the extent that he's successful, that's going to be another challenge for OpenStack or private clouds in general, right?
No. Larry doesn't understand open source. Larry wants a red data center.
Okay.
They have a phenomenal product, and I've been working on Oracle technologies for 7 years. Phenomenal product, but it's the core tenets that he's built that company on are very different from the core tenets that OpenStack was founded on. That's just my fundamental belief.
Oracle's skating to where the puck was.
Sorry?
Oracle is skating to where the puck was.
Oh, okay.
That's not the strategy for winning.
They're chasing
They're building a cloud for legacy
yesterday's
apps.
battles.
Yeah.
I got you. All right.
Yeah. But it'll be good if you're running Oracle and you just want to get it off your lift and shift.
Yeah, I mean, I think the assumption here is the whole world is going to shift over time, and whether that is a decade or a half a decade or 2 decades.
It's not a cloud. It's a virtualization platform for legacy applications.
Okay.
Google's a cloud.
Google's cloud.
Google's a cloud. Amazon's a cloud. Microsoft Azure is a cloud.
Not on premises.
Cloud is not an outsourcing model. I've written about this, many, many times. It's a difference between mindsets. It's the pets versus cattle thing, right? I mean, the way Google's designed, and I'm talking about Google in the broad sense, is that it's designed for massive scale, and it's not designed for these legacy applications. You're not going to run, Oracle RAC on top of Google. They don't run Oracle RAC in the back end. It's a different way of thinking about things. It's the same kind of mentality that puts an individual, battery brick on every single server board instead of running a centralized DPS in the data center. It's we're going to run, millions of servers, so we have to rethink the IT stack, right? And all those things are coming out. Let me ask you a question. I'm going to ask you a question.
Randy,
Okay.
just to be clear, on your point on Google is cloud, Microsoft is cloud, Azure is cloud, you're trying to make that just virtualization is not cloud, but you need more.
Virtualization is not cloud.
Okay, just to be clear, because like a lot of people might get, OpenStack is not cloud or OpenStack
No,
based.
OpenStack is a
It's a
tool
cloud.
for building clouds, right?
Thank you.
It is not a cloud. If you went back and you told your ETL data warehouse guy 10, 15 years ago that they were going to throw out their Fiber Channel SAN and their Sun Sparks and their Oracle software for the ETL data warehouse in favor of a bunch of scaled-out Linux boxes running open source software that had no redundancy and no data protection at the disk level like Hadoop gives you, they would have told you you're crazy, and they would have laughed you out of the room. They would have said, "Get the hell out of here. We're never going to treat our data like that." Except that's exactly what Google did, right? And Hadoop is a clean room rewrite of Google's MapReduce that includes not only the software architecture but the underlying hardware architecture as well. And that's cloud. That's sort of thinking differently about the way that we do IT, right? Cloud computing is the kind of computing that powers the big cloud guys that is now leaking into the mainstream. It's not virtualization. It's not containers. It's a different way of doing IT. That's why cloud native can apply to OpenStack and it can apply to containers. It applies to Amazon, but it does not apply to Oracle 10G, 11G.
Yeah, I think that
Thanks, Randy.
the key thing is that there are new workloads and there are old workloads. And at any point in time, our research shows that 80% of developers are working on older stuff.
Right.
And that shifts very slowly over time, right? So
Correct.
if you're going to focus on the new, you have a sort of a limited addressable market, and that's fine.
Yeah, that's
You
not
know?
true though, because if you
Excuse
look
me,
at
guys.
all of the analyst numbers, the growth on the new cloud native apps is 10x that of the other. And in a straight line extrapolation, we actually crossed the threshold around 2018, 2020, depending on who's counting, where the new applications actually in total outnumber the old applications.
Thanks, Randy. There was a question from the audience, so
No?
someone over there wanted to ask a question. Okay,
No.
cool. Sorry. You had a question for the moderators.
I have a question for the
You
moderators.
had a question, so.
No, I was going to ask it. I mean, your experience seeing sort of like Hadoop rolled out and sort of the embracing of cloud technologies. I mean, it's game changing for the average enterprise, right? And that's my experience. I just kind of like to hear your experience. You talk to more enterprises maybe than I do. Like, is it game changing for something like Hadoop to roll out, which is clearly cloud technology stolen from Google and brought to the masses?
Yeah, I mean, big data is happening, right? There's lots of data being generated. People want to massage it. There's a lot of new technologies out there competing for what style of processing you want, whether be it Hadoop or Spark or anything else that comes tomorrow. But I wouldn't necessarily call, and most of those, by the way, are being processed in a, as you would say, the cattle approach, right? Because you have massive parallel processing. So these are clearly part of the new workloads, right? But all of that is additive over and above your SAP R3 or your data warehouses, and nobody has turned anything off yet, all right? And so that's the problem.
Mainframes still exist.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, there are so many legacy platforms out there. There are always going to be old systems. There's something that came across my Twitter feed the other day where somebody had a Commodore 64 that they were running in their machine shop because it ran this balancing hardware and all of the keys were worn down and they just had it. There are systems like this out there in the world, and it's one of the reasons why it's a small but very lucrative market to virtualize systems like this. Banks. How many banks are still, like, the demand for COBOL programmers is going up because COBOL is still a thing out there that people need to run these old business systems. And the strategy that a lot of these businesses are taking are to keep the systems there because they know how they work and they know how they run, but virtualizing them. And the moment you talk about virtualization, then if you have a cloud platform, it can become a way to migrate your past into your future. If you don't have the will or the stomach to rewrite systems, or the need to, then the idea that you're going to talk about OpenStack is it's either one thing or the other. It's either going to be cloud apps on top of it, or we're going to support legacy apps. It can do both. It's an incredibly powerful and flexible platform, and there's no reason to say that one is going to fail over the other.
Yeah, just on that point, I've actually been shocked to the point of terrified of the number of customers I interacted with that have legacy applications and will leave them on that legacy platform because they don't know how they work and they don't know how to move them.
They lost the source
They
code.
lost the source code. They lost the people. And they're like, if I look at it the wrong way, we're screwed. And so they leave it. I met with the CTO of a healthcare company here in town. They said, look, we've got one of everything sitting in our data center just because it's functional. If it's not broken, we don't touch it. And I think what's changing now is that we're in this purchasing shift between where as a CIO, I would historically buy everything and put it on hardware in my data center now to where SaaS is often leading the way for a lot of the solutions that folks are buying. And I think that transition is helping kind of sunset a lot of those legacy pieces versus trying to move them. But that it's a kind of a terrifying state of affairs to some extent.
So, any questions from the audience?
So it's a follow-on question to that whole conversation. It's actually the question I thought you were going to ask when you started talking about legacy systems, and the question we queued up earlier on the panel. So I'd love to hear what you guys think about moving those legacy systems into the machine containers or system containers, like a Virtuoso or a Canonical LXD or something like that. Do you see people doing that? And then a follow-on question to that is Canonical's announcement the other day with Kubernetes, is that kind of saying that maybe that didn't work so well, the LXD experiment?
So one thing I would like to make clear is legacy is not a derogatory term, right? So a lot of people use legacy saying that as if it's a bad thing. It may be legacy, right? So it depends on your definition and the connotation you have with
Heirlooms.
legacy, right?
Heirlooms, right?
It works. Businesses really don't care about containers. Businesses really don't care about if it's a cloud or not. Businesses care about, is it making me money? Is it giving me an edge over my competitor? If it is, then it's fantastic. I'll adopt it. No, I won't. And sometimes they may be wrong. They may be like just doing the math wrong and saying whether this will give me a competitive advantage or not. But I think we have to remember that IT supports the business, right? Is the business making money or not?
And you talk about the idea of containers. You shouldn't container just to container. I'm going to run, my database inside of my container. Well, why are you doing this? I'm going to run OpenStack inside of my container. Well, why am I doing this? If you're doing it just to do it, you're going to find that it doesn't meet the needs that you have. But talking about, like the OpenStack Ansible deployment, which uses LXC containers to deploy OpenStack. Why does it do this? Because they want to have a clear upgrade path and be able to upgrade multiple components on a system without breaking the other components, right? And that's so once you go into that with that understanding, then you can have a target of why you're doing this and why you're moving to that. So if you're moving your database to containers because it gives you some sort of scalability that is easier to manage than you would deploying them traditionally behind a traditionally run load balancer, then do it for those reasons.
Are you seeing it? That was the question. Are you actually seeing people doing it?
I'm using container systems that are. I mean, personally, I've used it in the last week, but my situation is special, and I can't speak to what other people are seeing.
So Apple Siri is the largest Mesosphere deployment in the world. It's Docker on bare metal, and it does include Oracle running inside of Docker. So people do that. It is doable, right? This nonsense about, containers are only good for stateful or stateless applications is complete. Like, I don't even know where people get that kind of crap. It's just ridiculous. But then to circle back a little bit, one of the things I still see people getting very confused about, and it's hard for me to be on this panel and not just want to bogart the mic because I have dozens of presentations on this, is that, if you look at what's happening, the transformation now, the reason there's so much disruption in the industry, the reason companies like IBM and HP are so challenged at the moment is because of that disruption. The last time we saw this was when client server was initiated and we transitioned out of the mainframe model, right? That's why it's such a big deal. And that's why I'm encouraging you to have these stark contrasts between pets versus cattle. And when you looked at that transition out of mainframes, like what drove people off the mainframe? Did they start taking their damn apps off the mainframe? No, not one. Nobody was in a hurry to get their damn app off the mainframe. Nobody. The reality is when client server came along, it created the possibility to do all new stuff. What's on Amazon is all new stuff. All the growth is all new stuff. The reason that the new apps are growing at 10x the old apps is because now we can do stuff. We can do it faster. We can unlock value in the business much faster. So you might go, hey, our developers, 80% of them are like dealing with our legacy stuff. Yes, today that might be true. But you won't be competitive as a business in your vertical if, in 5 years from now, or whatever the time horizon is, 80% of your guys aren't on the new stuff. Instead, the next Airbnb, the next Uber, whoever is going to come and eat your lunch. And that is the world that we live in now. So you can try to focus on these legacy apps and bring them over to OpenStack or, God forbid, sticking them on Amazon, but you are not thinking about what you really need to do for your business, because the imperative right now is how do I allow the line of business to go at the fastest speed possible and to create new opportunities for my business? How do I be a technology business first and in my vertical second? And that is an existential crisis for every single enterprise. Period, end of discussion.
Yeah, you don't follow up that. That's true. Okay. Great.
Okay.
Next question.
I think we are almost out of time. So if you all want to say something to the audience, maybe one-liner, two-liners, please go ahead. What do you want to say?
Thank you for putting up with my ranting and raving. And, I encourage you to check out my blog, cloudscaling.com, and my SlideShare, slideshare.net/Randy Bias, because there's just a ton of great stuff on there. And it's better than me repeating it all the time.
So I'm going to actually have an answer to Andy's things about the technology moving us faster. One of the other things that we kept hearing in a number of the presentations today too is the culture matters too. The culture and the technology matters. And yeah, that's it. Thank you, everyone. This has been a great event.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks, Shreya, for putting the event together.
Thank you for having me. Enjoyed every minute of this, and just echo everything that these fine gentlemen have said.
Thanks again. And OpenStack is here to stay. It's not going away.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank
And,
you.